A brand new presidential executive order is taking aim at one of the most fundamental ideas in American law, the idea that if you're born in the U.S., you're a citizen, period. Now, this isn't just some small policy tweak. It's a direct challenge to a legal precedent that has been the law of the land for over 125 years.
And just listen to this single line from the order. This really sets the stage for a massive constitutional showdown. It's arguing that for some people, citizenship is no longer an automatic right just because they were born here. So that brings up the huge question we're going to explore today. Can a president actually redefine citizenship with just the stroke of a pen?
So, on January 20th, 2025, the White House issued this order to try and end birthright citizenship for the children of non-citizens. The administration's whole position here is that the Constitution has actually been misinterpreted for more than a century.
Now, the order isn't a blanket ban. It's actually really specific. It targets two main groups of children born in the U.S. The first is kids whose mothers were here unlawfully, as long as the father wasn't a citizen or a permanent resident. And then there's a second group, and this one might surprise you. It's children whose mothers were here legally, on temporary visas, think tourists or students, again, unless the father had citizenship or a green card.
Yeah, this really gets to the heart of it, right? I mean, most of us were taught that the 14th Amendment guarantees citizenship to anyone born on U.S. soil. So how can an executive order just change that? Well, to figure that out, we actually have to go way back in time.
The entire modern debate over birthright citizenship, believe it or not, all comes down to a single Supreme Court case from way back in 1898. And at the center of it was just one man, a cook from San Francisco, whose personal fight would end up defining American citizenship for generations to come.
This is him, Wong Kim Ark. He was born in San Francisco in 1873. His parents were Chinese immigrants. They had a permanent home and a business right there in the U.S. But because of the discriminatory laws back then, they weren't eligible to become citizens themselves. Now, Wong Kim Ark always saw himself as an American, but the U.S. government, well, they were about to disagree.
So the whole thing really came to a head in 1895. Wong Kim Ark had traveled to China before and had been let back into the country without a problem, but this time was different. Officials blocked him from re-entering. And their argument? They said that because his parents were subjects of the Emperor of China, he wasn't a U.S. citizen, even though he was born in San Francisco. He was actually detained for months, and that's when his case started heading to court.
Wong's case basically forced the courts to answer a question that had been bubbling under the surface since the Civil War, and it all boiled down to how you interpret just 5 words in the Constitution. What does it really mean to be subject to the jurisdiction of the United States?
So here it is, the text itself. This is the Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment. The first part, all persons born in the United States, that seems pretty straightforward. But it's the next phrase, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, that became the entire battleground. Everyone agreed Wong was born in the U.S., but was he truly under its jurisdiction?
Okay, so Wong's lawyers based their argument on a really old legal tradition called jus soli. That's Latin for right of the soil. And the principle, which came from English common law, is super simple. If you're born on a country's soil, you are a citizen of that country. It's all about geography, not who your parents are.
So you had these two sides with completely different ways of reading this. Wong's team argued that jurisdiction just meant you had to follow the nation's laws, something that applies to pretty much everyone physically inside the country. But the government argued it meant something much deeper, like complete political allegiance. They claimed that since Wong's parents owed allegiance to China, Wong himself couldn't be fully subject to the jurisdiction of the U.S.
Well, in 1898, the Supreme Court finally made its decision, and they sided with Wong Kim Ark in a decisive 6-2 ruling.
The court's majority basically said, yep, the 14th Amendment fully embraces that old principle of jus soli, the right of the soil. They ruled that subject to the jurisdiction just means you're subject to U.S. laws, not that you can't have any allegiance to a foreign power. At the end of the day, being born on U.S. soil was what mattered most.
And the court was super clear about how few exceptions there were. The only people born on U.S. soil who were not citizens were children of foreign diplomats, children born to an enemy army during an occupation, and, back then, members of Native American tribes. And this is the crucial part. Children of resident aliens, like Wong's parents, were explicitly not on that list of exceptions.
Okay, so with all that history as our foundation, let's jump back to 2025, because this new executive order isn't just challenging a policy, it is going right after the conclusion of the Wong Kim Ark case itself. I mean, remember this. This was the big takeaway from 1898. The Supreme Court's majority opinion couldn't have been clearer. The 14th Amendment includes the children of resident aliens.
You'd think the question was settled for good, right?
And now, compare that to the language of the new order. Wow, the contrast is just stark. It directly contradicts the 1898 ruling claiming citizenship does not automatically extend to these exact same groups.
And here is the real kicker, the key thing to understand. The legal theory behind this new executive order, it isn't new at all. It's almost a carbon copy of the argument the government made against Wong Kim Ark and lost. The administration is basically betting that today's Supreme Court will side with the argument that was completely rejected over a century ago.
And if you want to see just how close the connection is, you don't have to look any further than the dissenting opinion from the 1898 case. The losing side argued that subject to the jurisdiction meant not having allegiance to a foreign power. That is the exact same interpretation the new executive order is now trying to make into law.
So, as you can imagine, this sets up a historic constitutional showdown. The order being issued is really just the opening shot in a legal battle that is almost certainly going to go all the way to the Supreme Court.
And the fight is already on. I mean, within days of the order being signed, civil rights groups and state governments filed lawsuits to block it. As everyone expected, the lower courts have issued injunctions, which puts a stop to enforcement for now. But these are just temporary. The administration is, of course, appealing, pushing this monumental question all the way up the legal ladder.
And that brings us right here to today. The case of a Chinese cook from the 19th century is now about to become a defining legal battle of the 21st. The Supreme Court is being asked to revisit and maybe even overturn one of its most foundational rulings on what it actually means to be an American.
And so that leaves us with the ultimate question. After more than a century of this being settled law, is the country about to completely redefine who is and who is not an American right from birth? The precedent set by Wong Kim Ark is now on trial itself, and honestly, the outcome is anything but certain.